The country was in a period of high tension, where almost every discussion seemed to return to politics. Families had disagreements at dinner tables, neighbors avoided certain topics, and online conversations often grew heated. It was a time when many people felt unsure about what was true and what was exaggerated. News channels spoke continuously about legal decisions, investigations, and debates involving former President Donald Trump. Some Americans believed the justice system was trying to unfairly target him, while others believed the justice system was simply doing its job. In the middle of this, the Department of Justice, known as the DOJ, became a central focus of public attention. The DOJ was a place with long hallways, many offices, and professionals who worked with laws and policies every day. Most of these workers preferred to stay out of the public eye. They spent their days reading documents, preparing legal cases, and discussing legal rules. For a long time, this work happened quietly. However, during this period, even quiet places became connected to large national conversations. Reporters watched every announcement, every change, and every statement that came from the DOJ. Social media users shared their opinions quickly, sometimes before full facts were known. This created an environment where even small actions could appear very significant. Inside the DOJ, there were lawyers, analysts, researchers, spokespeople, and other staff members who came from different backgrounds. Some had been working there for many years, while others were newer to the job. They had seen changes in leadership before, as new presidential administrations came and went. Normally, these transitions happened with careful planning and steady communication. However, this time felt different. The debates surrounding the former president had made the DOJ a symbol of larger national disagreements. Because of that, even regular office decisions could attract public interest. The tension was not always loud. Sometimes it showed up in quiet conversations in offices. Sometimes it appeared in how people chose their words during meetings. People inside the DOJ understood that every word could be examined and discussed by the public. The sense of caution grew. A few employees felt stressed, wondering if their work might be misunderstood by news outlets or commentators. Others tried to continue as usual, reminding themselves that their responsibility was to follow the law and maintain professionalism. Even so, the atmosphere felt heavier than it had before. Meanwhile, outside the building, the public watched closely. Supporters of Trump often said the justice system was being used unfairly against him. They believed that some individuals within the government were trying to influence politics. They saw themselves as defending fairness. On the other side, critics believed the investigations involving Trump were necessary and important. They said the law should be the same for everyone, including former leaders. They saw themselves as protecting accountability. Both sides felt strongly, and both believed they were standing up for what was right. The media played a large role in shaping how people saw the situation. Different news channels presented different interpretations of events. Some channels highlighted one perspective, while others emphasized a completely different one. This made it difficult for many Americans to feel confident about what was true. It was easy for misunderstandings to spread quickly. Even small comments could become topics of national discussion. As time passed, the DOJ had to make official decisions about ongoing cases. Many of these decisions were ordinary legal steps, yet they attracted attention because they were connected to broader political debates. Some press conferences were short and factual. However, once the press conferences ended, commentators analyzed every sentence. The same words could be interpreted in multiple ways depending on the listener's beliefs. This made it challenging to keep the public conversation calm. Within the DOJ building, staff members worked long hours. They reviewed legal documents, discussed evidence, and prepared briefings. They tried to separate their work from public noise, but they could not completely ignore it. Some staff felt the weight of responsibility more than ever. They reminded themselves that the law existed to guide them, even when outside pressure was strong. At the same time, the public continued to express strong feelings. People attended public events, wrote letters, and discussed matters online. These conversations sometimes grew emotional, but many people simply wanted clarity. They wanted to know what was happening and why. Some wanted reassurance that the justice system was fair. Others wanted reassurance that the justice system was not being influenced by politics. Both concerns came from a desire for stability. New information appeared frequently. News headlines changed from day to day, Sometimes a new statement or interview created confusion because different sources presented different interpretations. This made it easy for rumors to spread. Some people trusted only one source of information, while others did not feel sure whom to trust at all. The uncertainty added to the national tension. Through all of this, the DOJ continued its work. The employees understood that their duty was not to please one group or another, but to work carefully according to the law. They knew that every decision they made could be examined by the public. This awareness brought caution, patience, and sometimes quiet stress. As winter turned to spring and spring turned to summer, the situation did not fade. If anything, the attention grew stronger. The DOJ remained a central point in conversations about fairness, authority, and the role of government. Some people hoped the situation would soon become clearer. Others expected it might continue for a long time. Every day brought new developments, and no one knew exactly how events would unfold. Throughout the country, people continued to watch, listen, and form opinions. They talked in coffee shops, school hallways, workplace break rooms, and family living rooms. Some conversations were calm and thoughtful. Others were emotional. Yet behind all these discussions was a shared desire to understand the truth and to feel that the systems guiding the country were trustworthy. The atmosphere in the country remained filled with anticipation. The DOJ stood at the center of a story that was larger than any one person, larger than any single case, and larger than any single political disagreement. It was a story about trust, law, and how a nation faces difficult questions during complicated times. Everyone involved, whether inside the DOJ or watching from the outside, understood that the choices made during this period could influence the discussions and beliefs of many people for years to come. Inside the Department of Justice, the atmosphere continued to shift in quiet but noticeable ways. Even though the building looked the same from the outside, the energy inside it felt different. People still walked through the hallways carrying files and folders, and meetings still took place every day. But there was an unspoken awareness that many decisions were being watched more closely than before. Employees who had once spoken openly during discussions now chose their words carefully. Conversations that had once been friendly and lighthearted now felt measured and thoughtful. The staff members came from many backgrounds, and they held different personal views about the situation. Some believed the justice system was being questioned unfairly, while others believed that careful review was necessary to maintain trust. Most of them tried to focus on their work and not let personal feelings guide their decisions. They had gone through years of education and training to learn how to interpret laws, review evidence, and apply legal reasoning. However, no amount of training could fully prepare them for the intense public attention they were now experiencing. Because of the increased attention, some employees found themselves thinking twice before making even routine decisions. When they sent emails, they reviewed them a second time. When they discussed cases, they made sure their statements were precise. They understood that misunderstandings could spread easily in a time when people were eager to interpret actions quickly. Even small changes in tone or timing could be viewed as signs of something larger. Meetings grew more frequent, as various teams tried to stay coordinated. Some of these meetings focused on legal processes, while others centered on communication, how to explain events in a way that was clear and accurate. There were discussions about how to avoid confusion, how to maintain transparency, and how to reduce unnecessary speculation. Everyone agreed that clarity was important, yet clarity was sometimes difficult to achieve when events moved quickly and interpretations varied widely. In some offices, there were quiet disagreements. These disagreements were not dramatic arguments. Instead, they were thoughtful discussions where professionals tried to understand one another's reasoning. One lawyer might believe that certain steps should be taken now, while another might think it would be wiser to wait. Both individuals could be intelligent and experienced, yet they could still reach different conclusions. Such differences were normal in legal work, but now they felt heavier, because each choice had the potential to influence public perception. There were also moments when people paused and reflected on how their work was being viewed from outside. They knew that news commentators and social media users were creating narratives about the DOJ. Some of these narratives suggested hidden motives. Others suggested internal struggles. Some were based on facts, while others were based on assumptions. Inside the building, employees saw the situation with more nuance. They understood that decisions were rarely simple. Yet they also understood that nuance could be lost once events left the building and entered the public conversation. Meanwhile, the media continued to report every update with great attention. News outlets published articles, recorded interviews, and analyzed every change in staffing or procedure. Some reporters tried to present information neutrally. Others emphasized the perspective of one group or another. The same piece of information could be described in very different ways depending on the reporter's approach. For the public, this made it challenging to understand what was truly happening inside the DOJ. Social media played a major role as well. Posts spread quickly, sometimes reaching thousands of people within minutes. Many posts were not detailed explanations, but short statements that encouraged strong emotions. Some posts questioned the integrity of the DOJ, while others defended it strongly. People reacted to these posts instantly, often before taking time to research the full context. This added to feelings of confusion and division among the public. Inside the DOJ, some employees tried to ignore social media completely, believing it would only make their work more stressful. Others read posts occasionally, wanting to understand how the public was responding. Regardless of their approach, they all felt the effects of the public conversation. It influenced how they interacted, how they communicated, and how they managed uncertainty. As time passed, certain internal disagreements became harder to ignore. Some staff members felt that procedures were being delayed. Others believed decisions were being made more quickly than usual. These differences led to careful conversations behind closed doors. No one wanted to accuse anyone else of acting improperly. Most of the disagreements came from sincere attempts to interpret laws and responsibilities correctly. However, the pressure from outside made each disagreement feel more important. There were individuals within the DOJ who remembered earlier periods of national debate. They recalled times when the justice system was also under scrutiny. They reminded younger employees that institutions often go through difficult moments. However, even these experienced individuals acknowledged that this moment felt different. The speed of communication and the intensity of public reaction created a level of pressure that was difficult to compare to past experiences. In the middle of these internal tensions, work continued. Cases were reviewed carefully, documents were drafted, and legal arguments were prepared. Employees tried to keep their focus on the details. They checked sources, verified information, and discussed regulations. They knew the public conversation could shift from day to day, but the legal standards remained constant. This steadiness helped some of them stay grounded, reminding them that the core of their work had not changed. Yet it would not be accurate to say everything felt the same. The awareness of being observed, evaluated, and discussed added a new layer to every task. Even simple decisions could feel significant because they were happening in a moment when people were looking for signs of larger meanings. In this way, the internal friction inside the DOJ was not the result of personal conflict, but rather the result of living inside a story that had grown bigger than the institution itself. Outside the building, the public began to form expectations. Some people believed the DOJ would soon make statements explaining what was happening. Others expected investigations to change direction. Some hoped for quick clarity, while others believed clarity might take time. Talk shows, podcasts, and community discussions reflected these expectations. People asked questions, shared opinions, and waited for further developments. Through all of this, there were individuals inside the DOJ who tried to encourage calm. They reminded others that their responsibility was to remain consistent and thoughtful. They encouraged patience and focus. Their goal was to ensure that the work continued with integrity, even when the environment around them was filled with uncertainty. The internal friction at the DOJ was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and complex. It came from people trying to do their jobs while feeling the weight of national attention. It came from differing interpretations of responsibility. It came from the challenge of operating within a system that was being discussed by millions of people every day. The situation would continue to develop, and the choices made inside the building would have effects far beyond its walls. The employees understood this, and they carried that understanding with seriousness. The story of the DOJ in this time was not just about cases or documents. It was about people navigating uncertainty, responsibility, and public expectation, step by step, moment by moment. As the days continued to pass, the atmosphere inside the Department of Justice grew heavier. The quiet tensions that had been building slowly now began to show more clearly. What had once been small disagreements or unclear decisions started to turn into noticeable changes. One morning, several employees arrived at work and learned that some colleagues had been reassigned to different roles. These changes were announced in brief internal messages that did not offer much explanation. The messages were polite and formal, but they left many questions unanswered. Some staff members were surprised. Others had expected something like this might happen eventually. No one expressed strong emotion openly, but people exchanged thoughtful glances in hallways and elevators. In any workplace, changes in position and responsibility can happen at any time, but the timing here made the changes feel meaningful. The staff understood that the public was watching closely, and these internal adjustments would not remain private for long. Within a few days, conversations began to circulate outside the DOJ building. News outlets reported that certain officials had been removed from their previous roles. Some reports suggested the decisions were routine. Others suggested there was more happening behind the scenes. Because the DOJ rarely explained internal employment decisions in detail, the lack of information left space for speculation. This speculation grew quickly as reporters, commentators, and online communities discussed possible reasons for the changes. People across the country began sharing opinions. Some believed the changes showed that certain individuals had disagreed with leadership. Others believed the changes were simply part of the natural shifting of roles that happens in large organizations. Because there was no official explanation, every person interpreted the situation based on their own understanding and beliefs. This caused the story to grow larger than the facts alone. Inside the DOJ, employees continued working, but the mood was noticeably different. Meetings felt more focused and cautious. People listened carefully, paying attention not only to the content of discussions but also to the tone and expressions of others. The removals had created a reminder that internal disagreements could lead to real consequences. Some people began to keep more distance from discussions that felt uncertain. Others became quieter, preferring to observe rather than speak. At the same time, there were staff members who felt deeply committed to continuing their responsibilities. They believed that no matter what changes occurred, their duty to the law remained steady. They organized documents, reviewed cases, and prepared reports with care. These individuals focused on consistency, reminding themselves that their work needed to remain reliable even during uncertain moments. Their dedication helped keep the system functioning. Meanwhile, the media attention grew stronger. Television programs discussed the situation with animated voices. Newspaper headlines suggested urgency. Online platforms formed discussions that spread quickly. Each platform presented the situation in its own style. Some spoke in calm tones, trying to offer careful interpretation. Others used more dramatic language, suggesting that something unusual or unexpected was taking place. This variety of perspectives made it difficult for the public to understand what was happening with certainty. Supporters of former President Trump believed the changes showed that some people inside the DOJ felt pressure. They argued that the organization was trying to adjust in response to growing public attention. These supporters described the situation as proof that there was internal conflict about how certain legal matters should be handled. They said the removals suggested that not everyone inside the department agreed with current strategies. On the other side, critics believed the changes revealed a different issue. They argued that the DOJ was trying to strengthen its approach by placing individuals in positions where they could act more effectively. They believed the removals were part of a process of correcting internal disagreements or confusion. According to this view, the adjustments were not signs of instability but steps toward clearer leadership. Because these two groups held very different understandings of the same events, national conversation became more divided. People often spoke with confidence even when full details were not available. This created an environment where assumptions sometimes felt more powerful than facts. Inside the DOJ, leaders tried to manage communication carefully. They released statements that emphasized professionalism and continuity. The statements reassured the public that the department was functioning normally. However, because the statements did not contain detailed explanations, some people believed they did not provide enough answers. The lack of clarity encouraged further discussion and interpretation. Employees who had worked there for many years remembered times when internal adjustments happened with little public interest. In earlier years, these decisions would have been seen as ordinary. However, because the country was already experiencing a period of strong emotions and divided viewpoints, Even small actions felt meaningful. The employees understood that they were working in a moment of national sensitivity. As discussions continued in the media, the public waited to see what would happen next. Some expected more official announcements. Others believed that the situation would calm down soon. However, instead of calming, the story gained more attention. This was partly because there were still unanswered questions, and unanswered questions often invite speculation. The employees who had been reassigned or removed did not immediately speak publicly. Their silence added to the mystery. People wondered whether they would eventually share their experiences. Some believed they would offer statements soon. Others thought they might choose to stay private. Until they spoke, the narrative surrounding them would remain uncertain. The staff still working in the DOJ found themselves navigating both their internal responsibilities and the external attention. They reminded one another to stay focused. They reviewed procedures and ensured that documentation was handled carefully. They continued to meet deadlines and prepare briefings. Even in a time of uncertainty, the daily work remained important. The DOJ building itself became a symbol. For some, it represented stability and the long history of legal processes in the country. For others, it represented debate and disagreement about how justice should be carried out. People often saw the building on news screens, and each person connected their own feelings to the image. This added to the emotional weight surrounding the situation. In many households, people discussed the developments over meals or while watching the news. Some conversations were thoughtful and calm, focused on seeking understanding. Others were filled with strong emotions. In workplaces, people shared articles and viewpoints. In online communities, people debated continuously. The story reached into many parts of daily life. Even though the removals and reassignments were the central event, the deeper story was about trust. Many people wanted to believe that institutions were acting fairly and responsibly. Others feared that decisions were being influenced by outside pressures. Both perspectives came from a desire to feel secure in how the country functioned. The challenge was that people did not always agree about what fairness looked like. Throughout this time, one thing remained clear: the situation was still developing. There were unanswered questions, unfolding decisions, and ongoing discussions inside the DOJ. No one could yet say how events would progress or how the public would respond to future developments. What was known was that the department was at a point of significant attention, and the choices made in this moment could influence how people viewed the justice system for a long time. The wave of staff changes marked a turning point. It was the moment when private internal tension became visible to the public. It showed that the story inside the DOJ was entering a new phase, one that would bring even more attention, more discussion, and possibly more changes still to come.